They built 96 homes on land that was never theirs, wide streets, white fences, and shiny new mailboxes standing over stolen soil. For months, one man watched it all in silence. He didn't shout, didn't protest, didn't stop the bulldozers that tore through his grandfather's fields. The HOA thought they'd buried his family's name under layers of concrete. But what they didn't know was that he had the one piece of paper that could make it all crumble. When he finally walked into court, the truth he carried would shake an entire town to its core. But first, please make sure to subscribe the channel and comment below from which city you are watching this video. The morning it all began, the sound of heavy engines shattered the quiet fields of Goose Creek. Rodney Calhoun stood by his old Ford truck, staring at a convoy of bulldozers carving deep wounds into the soil his grandfather once farmed. The ground that had carried generations of cowhounds was now being flattened for driveways and cul-de-sacs. To anyone else, it looked like progress. To Rodney, it looked like theft. He'd spent his life as a land surveyor, a man who understood boundaries better than most. But that morning, the stakes in the dirt didn't match his maps. The workers told him to leave, that the HOA owned the parcel now. He didn't argue. He just looked out at the broken pecan trees and turned away, remembering what his grandfather always said, "Never argue with a fool who doesn't know where the ground ends." That night, under the hum of a kitchen light and the smell of black coffee, Rodney unfolded the survey maps he'd kept for decades. Every line matched perfectly, every tax payment stamped and recorded. The land was still his, had been since 1958, when his grandfather Hiram bought it acre by acre with sweat and pride. The Calhoun name had never left the deed. But when his cousin Benny called from Columbia, the truth hit harder than any machine could. "Rod," he said, "they're selling homes out there, Magnolia Grove Estates. 90-something units. They say it's all legal." Rodney didn't sleep that night. The land that had anchored his family for 60 years was being erased in front of him. Somewhere in the county's records, someone had rewritten history, and this time, it wasn't by mistake. The next morning, Rodney drove to the Charleston County Recorder's office. The clerk, a woman he'd known for years, greeted him with a strained smile. When he asked to see the ownership file for his land, her tone changed. "That parcel's under review," she said. "Developers from Magnolia Grove Holdings filed plans 2 years ago." 2 years, and he hadn't received a single notice. The more he asked, the quieter she became. When he pressed harder, she whispered, "Something about that plot doesn't add up." By the time he walked out, his patience had thinned and his coffee had gone cold. Signs lined the roadside on his drive home, future home of Magnolia Grove Estates. Each one felt like a warning. He stopped at the fence line, dug his boot into the dirt, and unearthed a rusted metal survey pin, proof that this was still Calhoun land. The following week, he stepped into the developer's trailer uninvited. Men in pressed shirts looked up from blueprints that divided his grandfather's field into numbered lots. Rodney told them they were building on the wrong land. They brushed him off, told him to take it up with the HOA, told him it was a done deal. But when he pulled out the original 1958 deed from his grandfather's rusted metal box that night, he knew it wasn't over. Rodney's father had warned him this day would come. Keep the papers safe, he'd said. The county might forget, but paper don't lie. Those words echoed as he brought the deed to a friend at the courthouse. The records told him possible story. The land had been rezoned 4 years ago, approved by someone named Fenton Construction, using a consent form signed by Gerald Calhoun, Rodney's father, who'd been dead since 2013. It was no clerical error. It was fraud. And as he dug deeper, the pattern became clear. The county offices had fast-track permits, stamped approvals, and ignored the Calhoun name, all to push through a project that wasn't theirs to sell. Still, Rodney stayed calm. He wasn't going to fight them with noise. He would fight them with truth. He hired a property lawyer, Jesse Brome, who warned him that the developers had money and influence, that they'd try to buy him off, intimidate him, or outlast him. But Rodney didn't care. "I'm not selling what's already mine," he said. Then the threats began. Anonymous calls. Letters slipped under his door. Black SUVs idling near his driveway. One night, he came home to find his front door broken and his computer gone. They weren't after valuables. They wanted evidence. Even as the pressure closed in, he refused to back down. He returned to the courthouse archives, combing through old microfilm with the help of a retired clerk named Clara. And there it was, the smoking gun, a rezoning form with his father's forged signature, dated years after his death. That single page was enough to unravel everything. It proved what Rodney already knew, that power had rewritten the truth. He recorded a short video that night, his voice steady but cold. If something happens to me, this file goes public. Then he locked the flash drive and the deed in a fireproof box. Because now, it wasn't just about land. It was about legacy, and the system that thought it could erase his family's name with a single pen stroke was about to learn that some things are written too deep to bury. Weeks later, the battle that began in silence erupted under courtroom lights. Magnolia Grove Holdings had made the first move, suing Rodney for defamation and interference with development. The irony wasn't lost on him. They had built on his land, erased his name, and now labeled him the criminal. The courthouse was packed. Reporters lined the aisles. Homeowners from Magnolia Grove filled the benches, some angry, others scared. Rodney sat quietly beside his attorney, Jesse Brome, steady and unshaken. He'd spent his life measuring boundaries. Now, he was here to defend the one that truly mattered. The HOA's lawyer spoke first, a polished man with perfect diction and false confidence. He called Rodney a disruptive individual, accused him of spreading lies, and claimed every regulation had been followed. But when Jesse stood, the air shifted. Calm, deliberate, and precise, he laid down the truth. My client isn't interfering with development. He's defending what was stolen. One by one, the documents were presented, tax receipts, survey maps, the original 1958 deed. But then came the bombshell, the rezoning approval signed in 2019 under the name Gerald Calhoun. Jesse paused, his voice steady. Gerald Calhoun passed away in 2013, Your Honor. This signature is forged. The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge leaned forward, her tone sharp. Mr. Pike, she said to the HOA's attorney, would you care to explain how a dead man signed a zoning form? The lawyer stammered, muttered about clerical errors, but the damage was done. Clara Bynes, the retired clerk, took the stand next. She confirmed what Rodney had uncovered, that the file had been tampered with, the signature added after approval, by a user account linked to Fenton Construction's legal department. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge's voice cut through the noise. Until ownership is verified, all further sales and construction in Magnolia Grove are suspended. For the first time in years, the power shifted back to the Calhoun name. As the crowd erupted, Rodney stayed seated, his hands folded. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He simply whispered, "Paper don't lie." The fight wasn't over yet, but the truth had finally spoken loud enough for the whole town to hear. By dawn the next day, Rodney Calhoun's name was everywhere. Headlines blazed across local and national news. Court confirms developer built 96 homes on wrong land. Cameras swarmed his yard, reporters shouted questions, and homeowners flooded his phone with calls. Some thanked him for uncovering the truth. Others, terrified of losing their homes, begged for answers. One woman's voice stayed with him, a young mother named Lydia Burns. She called in tears. "We didn't know, Mr. Calhoun. We bought our home in good faith. What happens to us now?" Rodney's reply was simple. "I'm not coming after families," he said softly. "I'm coming after the ones who lied to all of us." That call reminded him of why he fought, not for revenge, but for respect. As the fraud unraveled, the fallout came fast. Fenton Construction's CEO was arrested for forgery and conspiracy. County officials faced investigations. Investors vanished overnight. Magnolia Grove, once a symbol of luxury, became a monument to corruption. The empty houses stood like ghosts on stolen ground. Rodney kept his distance from the chaos. While the world argued about property lines, he returned to the land itself. He walked the fields where pecan trees still stood, rough roots clinging to the same soil his grandfather once tilled. For the first time in years, the ground felt his again. When his lawyer Jesse asked what he planned to do with the property, Rodney just smiled. "Build something honest," he said. Months later, the Calhoun Family Foundation was born, a nonprofit to protect small landowners and teach local families about land rights. Where half-built houses once stood, volunteers planted gardens and rebuilt fences. The new sign at the entrance read, "Calhoun Grounds, EST 1958. Reclaimed 2025. Reporters came again, asking what kept him fighting all this time. Rodney looked straight into the camera and said, "Because when you stop protecting your history, someone else will rewrite it for you." That single sentence spread across the country, not just as a victory quote, but as a warning. And as the sun set over Goose Creek, Rodney stood beneath the old pecan tree, hand resting on its bark, the air warm with the scent of soil and rain. His family's name was home again, steady, unbroken, and rooted where it had always belonged. Some fights, he thought, aren't for what you can gain, but for what must never be lost.